Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In the icy vastness of deep Russia, where pine and spruce forests stretch as far as the eye can see, covering the hills and valleys in a dark green blanket, winter sometimes lingers for 6 months. The icy wind blows relentlessly, making the tree branches groan under the weight of the snow, while the sky often remains low and heavy, like a promise of solitude. It was in this almost wild setting, between frozen dirt roads and carved wooden houses, that we found the small village of Winter Pollyanna, literally the Winter Glade. A modest place, forgotten by time, where modernity seemed to have stopped at the edge of the pine trees. Here, life followed the rhythm of the seasons, harvests, and evenings spent by the fire. The villagers, rough but warm, lived in a simplicity shaped by nature itself, where each day was a silent struggle against the cold and isolation. In the heart of this village, in a small house with steamy windows and a thatched roof, lived Anastasia Ivanovna. She was a young woman whose beauty seemed both fragile and indomitable, like a burst of light in the winter gloom. Her black hair fell in thick curls around her pale face, and her eyes, a clear, almost translucent blue, reflected the long winter nights, tinged with the mysteries of the northern lights that sometimes danced in the sky above the forests. Anastasia lacked wealth and pomp, but her presence radiated a rare warmth, an inner light born of the daily sacrifices she made for her family. She worked as a seamstress, her fingers nimble and precise, repairing and creating clothing for the villagers. Each stitch was a promise of hope, a thread stretched toward a better future for her 2 younger brothers, still fragile and full of dreams. Despite the harsh winter and the poverty that enveloped Zemnaya Pollyanna, Anastasia carried within her a quiet strength, a determination born of past trials and future hopes. Her days began early at dawn, often before the pale sun pierced the heavy clouds, and ended late, by the flickering light of a candle. Several hundred kilometers away, in the bustling metropolis of Moscow, life was quite different. There, beneath the glass and steel skyscrapers, where the streets lit up with neon and luxury, lived Dmitry Volkov at 38. The billionaire was a well-known and respected figure in the business world. His name resonated in the hushed corridors of the major energy companies and tech startups he had helped found. Yet, behind his dazzling success, Dmitry led a frozen existence, marked by absolute control over every moment. His timed and isolated life had gradually transformed into a gilded cage, where luxury could not fill the void left by the absence of real human connections. His gaze, often hard and analytical, betrayed the loneliness of a man who had everything except what truly mattered. One winter morning, tired of the constant hustle and bustle, Dmitry made a rare decision. He would flee the city. He needed silence, nature, and authenticity. Without really knowing why, he chose to take the train north, to an unknown destination, where time seemed to stand still. By a twist of fate, this train stopped at Zemnaya Pollyanna. Dmitry stepped cautiously from the carriage, his elegant but discreet fur coat draped around his shoulders, his shiny shoes crunching on the frozen earth. He observed this foreign world, these modest houses lined up under a pearl-gray sky, the sturdy silhouettes of the villagers surrounding him. The looks were wary, curious, sometimes cold. No one here was used to seeing a stranger, much less a man with a sophisticated, foreign appearance. As he walked along, a detail caught his eye. Beneath the creaking wooden roof of an old house, a young woman was mending a garment with rare patience and skill. Anastasia, absorbed in her work, did not immediately notice this unusual visitor. When she looked up, meeting Dmitry's gaze, she offered him a simple, warm, almost shy smile. A smile that seemed to warm the air around them, like a ray of sunlight piercing through the snow. It was a suspended moment, a meeting of 2 worlds. For Dmitry, that smile was a revelation. He felt, deep within himself, a sudden awakening, a thrill of emotion he thought lost forever. It was the first time in a long time that his heart beat with something other than the weight of business and loneliness. As the days passed, Dmitry found 1,001 reasons to return to Zemnaya Pollyanna, as if drawn by an invisible force. a gentleness he had never known in the glass corridors of Moscow. Every morning, he walked the snowy alleys under the low sky, trying to catch a glimpse of Anastasia. He watched her work with an almost reverent attention, observing her precise gestures as she mended the villagers' worn clothes, offered a smile to her weary father, or cast a tender glance at her brothers playing in the snow. Without a word, Dmitri sometimes helped in secret, discreetly dropping off some supplies at her house, repairing a fragile roof, or lending a hand to the locals. His presence, though silent, became a reassuring thread in Anastasia's harsh daily life. Yet this budding bond was fragile, for the worlds that separated them were as vast as the Russian winter itself. Dmitri was accustomed to lavish parties where crystal sparkled, to billion-ruble negotiations, to luxury hotels where every detail was a reflection of power and image. Anastasia, on the other hand, lived with little, but surrounded by a close-knit community where everyone had known each other since childhood. Here, wealth was suspect, often associated with duplicity and betrayal. She sensed, with every discreet glance or hushed whisper, the villagers' suspicion, who struggled to understand why a man of Dmitri's stature would be interested in a simple seamstress. Their first exchanges were therefore timid, sometimes awkward. Anastasia lowered her eyes, embarrassed by this unexpected attention, while Dmitri tried to hide his nervousness behind simple questions about village life, about being a seamstress, about the dreams she barely dared to whisper. But little by little, these conversations grew longer, gained in depth. They talked about life, about the loneliness that sometimes gnawed at Dmitri despite his fortune, about the hope that burned in Anastasia's heart for her brothers, about dreams of a fairer, brighter future. Sometimes, they shared a silence, heavy with unspoken words but full of promise. When Dmitri announced to his relatives that he wished to extend his stay in Zemnaya Polyana, the reception was frosty. His uncle, an austere and unscrupulous businessman, frowned. "This is not the place for you, Dmitri. You're wasting your time and your reputation." His more pragmatic advisors reminded him that his image had to remain impeccable, and that dating a village girl from humble beginnings would only tarnish his career. In their eyes, Dmitri read doubt and condescension, the fear that a simple, sincere love would destroy the house of cards he had built over 20 years. For her part, Anastasia was facing a different kind of storm. The village, where traditions and gossip were fierce, did not look kindly on this affair. Why would a girl like her attract such a powerful man? Some whispered, their eyes heavy with suspicion. Some whispered that she was seeking to rise through ambition, that she might betray her roots. Distrust mingled with envy, with the fear of change, digging an invisible but deep wedge around Anastasia. But through thick and thin, their relationship grew, strong and sincere. They learned to know each other, to support each other in the face of nagging doubts, vast social differences, and bitter prejudices. Dmitri found in Anastasia a forgotten humanity, a gentleness capable of soothing his tormented heart. She, in turn, discovered in him a man far more vulnerable than the cold image the city projected. Then, one day, a scandal suddenly erupted. Stolen photos of Dmitri and Anastasia together were published in the media. Instantly, criticism and jealousy raged. Anastasia was vilified, accused of being an adventurer who had come to trouble a powerful man. Social media and the tabloids painted a picture of a self-serving woman, ready to do anything to advance herself. Dmitri, meanwhile, was accused of dirtying himself by dating a village girl, some going so far as to call it a passing whim, an error in judgment. Their hearts were put to the test. It was no longer just society that divided them, but their own fears, their insecurities. Anastasia sometimes doubted her worth, fearing she was nothing more than a mirage in Dmitri's life. He himself struggled with the voices of the past, the invisible chains of his rank and responsibilities. But in this turmoil, their love did not weaken. On the contrary, it became a shared struggle, a new strength to face a world ready to crush them. Together, they learned that love, when it is true, is fueled not only by passion, but also by courage and resilience. On a winter night as snow fell gently, covering Moscow in a pristine white blanket, Dmitri brought Anastasia to the capital. He wanted this moment to be unique, worthy of their story, a moment suspended between dream and reality. Under a starry sky, where the starlight seemed to rival that of the city, he guided her to a restored old theater, a hidden gem in an ancient neighborhood, a symbol of rebirth and timeless beauty. The theater, with its delicate gilding, red velvet seats, and glittering chandeliers, offered an almost magical setting. The air was thick with a gentle warmth, contrasting with the cold outside, and the stage seemed to be waiting for their story to come alive. Dmitri, usually self-possessed, showed a rare emotion. He took Anastasia's hand, looked her straight in the eyes, and, in a whisper, confided, "Anastasia, you are the light that warmed my heart on the coldest nights. I want to build a future with you where we will always be together, where I will be your rock and your protection. Will you marry me?" The words slid between them like a sacred promise. Anastasia felt tears welling up in her eyes, a mixture of joy, relief, and gratitude filling her. She accepted, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, Dmitri. Yes, forever." That moment marked the beginning of a new life for them, a life shared between the vibrant modernity of Moscow and the warm simplicity of Zemnaya Polyana. A few years later, their love had solidified, nourished by the contrasts they had learned to combine. Dmitri continued to manage his empire, but his travels became less frequent, while Anastasia drew strength from the land of her childhood. Together, they launched a sewing school in the village, a project dear to Anastasia's heart, designed to provide young girls with the tools to rise above the constraints and dreams they face. Dmitri invested tirelessly, convinced that local development was the key to a better future. This school quickly became a symbol of hope, a beacon in the darkness for the community. Their love story, blending tradition and innovation, village and capital, wealth and humility, proved that social and geographical barriers could be broken down by the strength of the heart. They were living proof that true love could break down all boundaries, those of class, judgment, and fear. Every winter, they returned together to the snowy paths of Zemnaya Polyana, where the entire village celebrated their union, no longer with suspicion, but with pride and admiration. Their love had become a legend, a modern tale that reminded everyone that sometimes magic could exist, even in the coldest and most remote places.